Hey guys, it's Matt. This very quickly will evolve into a reality talk on the principle of opposites in this place. Particularly, do we go too far in applying the principle of opposites? You know, what they tell us is good for us. Is it 100% of the time that whatever they say, we do the opposite? Can we take this concept too far? Does it apply to the natural world, like the relationship between animals and humans? I'm going to get into all that, something that's really not in the book that I wanted to talk about for a long time. But as I've mentioned a few times, I do take a quick glance at, say, CNN.com and the headlines, just so I don't embarrass myself before making a video about a reality talk. Let's say if 5 or 7 cities in the world like no longer exist, like gay Paris is gone or something major happened, I need to be aware of that. So I take a quick glance at the headlines and, oh no, schools closed and Maine residents on lockdown as police search for mass shooting suspect. They just did that. That guy was running around right outside my window. I think Chester County, Pennsylvania. Remember that? Matt, they're doing it. They're doing it again. It seems like. Matt, did you research this all morning? I didn't spend even 30 seconds on it. I don't give a shit. I don't care to. But it's just, when it's the biggest news and it's pushed like this, we're going to talk about the principle of opposites in just a few minutes. When the news is pushed so heavily, we've kind of learned that in most cases, just the opposite is true. And they've got signs here they've pushed out all over the highways. It says shelter. The signs, the electronic signs they've pushed out all over Maine, right from CNN, it says shelter in place. Nobody's allowed to go anywhere, setting a precedent. You have one person in society that now does something, what about the Crips and the Bloods in Los Angeles? What didn't Boys from the Hood and Doughboy and those guys show us that just shit's normal? But now the precedent is you got one person doing something very bad, you have to shut down the whole Northeast, and then they'll keep spreading it out. Then it'll be shut down all the way down to Philadelphia. Shelter in place, you poor devils. Then it'll be all the way down to Baltimore. Then it'll be one guy in Maine running around, say, next year. Then it'll be all the way down to Atlanta. Then it'll be the whole country will have to shelter in place because one guy robbed a sack of suds in Tennessee or something. Shelter in place, and then your phone will start beeping at 5:30 in the morning. Beep, beep. Two guys in a lime green, whatever, robbed the sack of suds. Everybody in the country, shelter in place. Give me a break. You can see the precedent that's being set here, or trying to be set. To me, I trace it back to the Boston Marathon bombing. They used the Tsarnaevs, is that what they were called? They used, what was that, a chicken fryer, it was a pressure cooker, right? Oh yeah, pressure cookers. Yeah, that. And then what did they do to the entire city of Boston? Complete lockdown. And that's the military tank type vehicles that all the police forces have now in the inner cities rolled by, and people screamed out their windows like, I want to go outside. I have the Constitution. You don't have the Constitution today, ma'am. And if you say it again, I'm going to come and arrest you. The Constitution only applies when we say, you stay inside. You take one step. But I have the Constitution overrides all. The Bill of Rights overrides all other laws. You can't do this. Take one step out of the house, ma'am, and test to see if the Constitution really applies. Now get back in your Southie Boston apartment. Watch, go put in your copy of Good Will Hunting. All you people up here have it. So they did it in Boston, and then it's a precedent being schools closed. Everybody stay at home. The 2020 event, the See the Me, that presentation, same thing, lockdown, stay at home. They're coming up with all sorts of different ways to push this on the populace. The Whopper supercomputer is coming up with different ways. It's coming up with all sorts of ways where people are told by government, you must stay inside. And this theme will continue. They're in love with this right now. That doesn't mean I don't know what happened in Maine. That doesn't, I don't want to go too far as one of these first grade truthers said, everything in the world must be cake in a lake. Well, see, sometimes real things happen. I'm not saying it's real. I don't know. Why would I say it's real or cake in a lake? I didn't look at it for even 10 seconds. But there's 400 million guns in this country. Things will happen from time to time. They're prepared to use whatever happens and maybe even wait for those things to happen for their own agendas. Certainly could be cake in a lake. I don't know. But I'm saying it's not always that. You don't think they're just waiting for an event and they will use it to lock down because that's the agenda they're pushing now? Lockdown? Yes. So I'm not saying definitively I've researched it. It's a Robbie Bibby. don't know what it is. Maybe it really happened in Maine. But from our perspective now going forward, unless you want to return to first grade truth, we don't, well, I can't speak for you, but I don't give a shit anymore if the event is real or not. It wants me back in that bog. Okay, let me calm down. If I go on like this, Gary will say I'm being manic, whatever that means. I got excited when I saw the headline. I saw the headline on CNN.com about what's happening in Maine. I got excited for two reasons. One, that presentation was just here in my backyard 2 or 3 months ago, like we talked about. The dude escaped from a local jail or prison. He went up the walls like a big old spider, remember? And he was running around. And then was it a 2-week manhunt and all that? They just did that. Okay, but also it brought back the old Russian vids breaking down the Cake in a Lake Mall and School event days. It was just weird. It's now reality's returned to that to a degree, where every day you would run home from school to see what Cake in a Lake Mall or school event is being broken down by Russian vids, because the Not Milk Reality was presenting one almost daily. Not just they weren't just the big ones like I don't know what I can say, but there were all sorts of them. It wasn't just the big ones, like the Harvest Festival. What a coincidence! Route 91. Oh, sure, well, that's just a coincidence, and you're one of those people. I just did a little Russian vids reminiscing. That's all. I was pretending the world was back in 2009, 2010, when the world made sense. Matt, the world made sense when the Not Milk just constantly presented Cake in a Lake events that had no legitimacy whatsoever. That world made sense compared to this world, no doubt about it. I long for the days when the strangest thing on the news was a Peter Pan Captain Hook type event moment in the Northeast, where you have a strange little man approaching a podium the day after, named Robbie, and you go, Robbie Bibby Bubba, but that really confuses the Bob, and you go, Robbie Bibby Bubba, and he says, are we ready? I'm one of the parents who last night, sir, yes? Sir, why are you at a podium when less than 20 hours ago why are you even talking to the press? No questions. Those days were completely normal compared to today. Today you have 1 in 10 households have a child, and even though they use the restroom normally, they don't even know what they are. And they might be something on Monday and be something else on Tuesday, and they flip up back and forth using the restroom, and whatever happens in there has no effect on what they choose to be. The world of Robbie Bibby, that was completely normal compared to a world of today that's completely and utterly broken down. Not Milk, if you're listening through the Chat GPT, you have derailed, my friend. So let's use the current headline to transition into our more calm and serious presentation today on a fake world of opposites. Everything presented in this world that's important, generally the opposite is true. The $1 trillion education system in the West brings zombified morons and no ability to think at all. The medical system, although there are exceptions, does not bring cures and good health, although it has to make a good presentation every once in a while, or even the dumbest of your neighbors would start to question it. I know somebody that just had a heart surgery. It was very successful. Probably adds 20, 30, 40 years onto his life. It has to make a good showing in a certain sense, or therefore it would even be questioned by the dumbest of us. So it's not always opposite. We have to be aware of this as well. The Western society and its banking systems and its capitalist markets that provides liquidity is the freest in the world. In the entire world, it's the freest. No, it's probably the one that creates the most debt slavery, and it's probably just the opposite. The Islamic world bans interest. It's called haram, forbidden under Islam. So there is no debt slavery in the same way. Now, the Not Milk is everywhere, folks. I'm sure they find a way to screw over their citizenry. I haven't been to Baghdad recently. I don't know exactly how it goes down or whatever, or how you get your mortgage for whatever, or if they even have that. I don't know, but I'm just starting with the basics. They don't have interest, which is a good place to start if you don't want to create a complete financial system that you can never dig out of, your debt slavery system that's completely, of course, designed for the super rich. Of course it is. The famous Saturday Night Live skit around 1984, it was. Wouldn't it be funny if it was 1984, Orwell's year? he goes in, well, Eddie Murphy dresses up and puts makeup on, dresses as a white man, goes into a bank for a loan. You've all seen it. I'll be brief. And he asks about payment terms, repayment terms, interest, and the bank. He's the only guy in there, and the other racists aren't around, so it's just take it. Just, well, pay back? You don't have to pay it back. Just how much do you need anymore? Just take it. It's a truth drop, ladies and gentlemen. It's real, not for skin color or anything like that, but for those that have achieved a level of standing or rank in whatever this not milk system is. Some would say bloodlines, family background. Somebody like Tony might say the sequential incarnation, a different type of entity than you are. For a certain class, they have access, of course, to whatever money they want. There's no payback. There's no interest. Even a lower level minion. Who's that guy? I watched all those financial shows and about, the collapse stuff and a financial collapse coming 2008, 9, 10, 11, never comes. I stopped. I'm like, okay, they've kept it going this long. I guess they'll keep it going. I'm done with all those shows. And then what the realization was, the entire economy is being managed on a supercomputer. The entire world economy is being managed like a video game. So there is no point in looking at supply and demand forces to see when the economic collapse is coming. I don't know what these economic collapse YouTube channels are talking about today. I hope they've graduated from the second grade, but I don't know. But the point is, this guy would come on these shows. He's this rich dad, poor dad guy. He wrote these books, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, trying to help people with finance. He might have a Hawaiian background, but he presented himself that had a lot of money. I mean, I don't know how many millions and millions, but his whole pitch on a lot of his presentations was, when I get involved in an investment, I'm going to build this tract of housing or these office buildings or this new mall on the south side of Honolulu or whatever. He's like, I don't take any risk. Or he said, I take very little risk. He's like, I can go to the bank. They give me what I need. They take the risk. Now, his ventures, I guess, are usually successful. The point is, this guy must be this rich dad, poor dad guy. Many of you know what I'm talking about, but I haven't heard from this guy in a long time. I mean, watch this stuff on YouTube. This would have to be a low-level minion, okay? It's not Bezos or Melvin, and even to us, those people are low-level minions. The point is, even he's saying he's not going to take the risk. He just goes and gets access to whatever he needs. In fact, that same theme was on the Beverly Hillbillies the other night. What is the rich family? Say the Crawfords. I don't know what they're called. The other richest family that Mr. Drysdale manages the money for, in addition to Jed Clampett and Granny. She wants to get Jed involved in a project, and she says right there on the Beverly Hillbillies, she says, I'm not taking any risk at all. You're going to give me the money, the bank. I'm going to do everything to get this investment in place, and then I'm going to own whatever percentage of it. She says right on the Beverly Hillbillies, she's not putting up a penny of her own money. And this is the second richest family, or of equal richness to Jed Clampett, Ellie Mae, Jethro, and Granny. Tells you right there in the Beverly Hillbillies, you get to that level, you can go get access to whatever money you need for your investments. It's just given to you. You don't take any risk other than making it look good. Maybe they put up 1% or 3%. And that's exactly what the rich dad, poor dad guy said, and they're all doing it above his level. It's Eddie Murphy with the face paint. What do you need? Do I have to pay it back? No, of course not. Is there interest? No. Take whatever you need. Just don't say anything. This is an absolute truth drop. It's 100% true if you are at a certain level inside their club. And if anybody was screaming at me 5 minutes ago, I hear you. Okay, I sometimes you just start talking. The bank's not taking, where the money's come from is not taking any risk because it's created out of thin air. I hear you. It's exactly right. Nobody's taking any risk. The Not Milk loves the show, I'm sure, the Beverly Hillbillies. It's run continuously on reruns. I enjoy the reruns. But the Not Milk probably was in love with it, whether the writers were, quote, in on it or not, because it presented exactly the view of the banking system that they want to get out to, quote, the West or the American public. In about half or even more than half of the Beverly Hillbillies episodes, Mr. Drysdale, the bank president, is terrified that Jed Clampett is going to withdraw his money. In one episode I just saw they're homesick and they're going to move back to the hills of Tennessee, or they're going to move back to Appalachia or whatever and take the money. And Mr. Drysdale, the bank president, is just terrified. Jed's going to move back to find a wife. No, we can find your wife here. God forbid, don't take your money out of my bank. That's what's presented for how many decades to the American people, that the banker needs that money so he can make loans. No. When the whole fractional reserve system was completely hidden from almost everybody, Mr. Drysdale didn't need Jed Clampett's millions. If somebody comes along and needs $2 billion for a project, he can create that money out of thin air. He doesn't need Jed Clampett's deposits to fund the loans, other than they say, what they tell us, for fractional reserve banking, they tell us 10%. And that is probably correct, that 10% for all the medium and small banks spread out all over the United States and the West. They probably need some deposits in order to make up the rest of the money that they didn't have for the loan. But what happens for the mega projects? Of course, again, it's not, the 10% is probably legitimate. You can't have every little banker and every little podunk bank, they're all in on it. They're all paid and threatened. No, that still allows them to make up a lot of loan. I mean, not having 90%, you can give out $900,000 for every $100,000 you have on hand. Just make it up, put it on the cashier's check, and then the person will need to pay it back with interest. All right, that's a scam in and of itself. But at the mega project level, you think they need 10%? Of course not. They don't need. The money comes from thin air. They don't even need 1%. Guys, I was just sitting here for a few minutes really thinking about that Beverly Hillbillies episode, and it could be a massive truth drop. It kind of just hit me that what happens, again, the older woman comes in who says she has 60 million or 100 million in the Drysdale's bank, and at the time maybe Jed Clampett has 60 to 80 million. So they're the two biggest depositors. She wants to do this mega project, and she very clearly, as I said, right from the start says, I'm not going to put up a penny of my own money or take any risk. Of course, if it all works out, she'll own 30 or 40 or 50%. Now, the banker, Mr. Drysdale, he pushes the old woman that has the money to go to Jed Clampett and try to scam him out. Maybe not scam, but go make a presentation to him to get the first 10 million. The banker says that first 10 million is the hardest to come by. The first 10 million you need for a project. So the banker wasn't even willing to put up the first 10 million. That would then allow the fractional reserve system to kick in, where he can make up the back end, whatever she needs, 900 million. The bank can then create out of thin air. So it's very weird how they presented it. If she's such a long-term customer, wealthy family relationships with the bank has more than $10 million on hand in terms of deposits. The Commerce Bank of Beverly Hills, of course, they have the fractional reserve requirement. Then they could make up whatever they need. She still doesn't have to take a penny of risk, but the bank isn't willing to do it. They want Jed Clampett to put up his own money to satisfy the first 10 million requirement for the fractional reserve to kick in for the Commerce Bank, then to make up the fake money on the back end. Guys, it is some sort of a truth drop in that episode of Beverly Hillbillies. It really is. The millions of people that watch that show and the reruns decade after decade, you go away with the notion, it's very simple. The bank needs a ton of rich depositors to keep their money in the bank, because the bank needs those huge deposits in order to make loans. If Mr. Jed Clampett takes all his money out, Mr. Drysdale's really in trouble, when he's not at all, because he makes up almost all the money that goes out of which they call a loan. Wow, what a sidetrack. In terms of a video about the opposites of this world, we're not going to get to a lot of the stuff I wanted to talk about. In the main topic, I don't think I'm going to get into it all. We'll save it for another video. Blame the headlines in Maine. Really, that's what completely got me going down the wrong path. The oh no headline from Maine about the 20-some dead, the guy, the manhunt, the whole state's locked down, all the schools are closed. We'll blame that, because that's what started this little sidebar, which went about 19 or 20 minutes longer than I expected. So let's at least start the conversation on opposites. This entire reality is a wolf in sheep's clothing. It presents itself as the sheep, but unzip it, it's the wolf. Only mentioned three things so far: the educational system producing dumb zombies, the healthcare system, and then I guess that's what led to this sidebar, the financial system not being at all what it's described to be. Okay, rule number one in what we'll call the axiom of opposites of this snow globe reality. It's like, the X and Y graph. The harder it's pushing its presentation, the more you know the opposite is true. So you can't just say across the board, everything is opposite. That's certainly not the case. Generally, authority would tell you and admit that drinking motor oil is not good for you. So if anybody in authority ever just slipped out, one does not want to go to Advance Auto Parts for whatever beverages. Okay, obviously that would be bad for you. That is not the opposite. But does the not milk really make that presentation? It's not just opposites across the board. You have to look at the vigor or the intensity or magnitude behind the not milk presentation. For example, the headlines in Maine, all over the place, manhunt, lockdown, because it's such a gigantic story, then the graph of how hard is it pushing it goes up and up and up. The X and Y graph goes up and up and up. Then as it goes up, and what we call the ministry, the not milk, is intent on making sure everybody knows about this story, the chances of that story being legitimate, then this is where the opposite comes in, goes down and down and down and down. We could even create a formula for the theory, where in the formula X is the event itself, or the news story, or the presentation of space, or whatever it may be, and then X, Y, or X to the Y is how much it wants everybody to know about this, how intense is its presentation, how hard is it working through its Ministry of Information bots. That's the other variable. And as the other variable, we could look to Maine and say, oh, this is a gigantic story. So per our formula, the chances of it being legitimate / true, etc., goes down and down and down by the same intensity to which it's being pushed. Therefore, I'm not spending even 5 seconds looking at Maine. I see how hard it's being pushed and how it's dominating the headlines across CNN and all forms of botted news outlets. Therefore, guess what? Without even spending 5 seconds, I don't buy it. Just based on that, yeah, I could be wrong. Like I alluded to earlier, they're going to use real events, etc., but I don't care. The formula is generally correct. They push it real hard. It's not what they say it is. It is almost never broken, that formula. And this question that arises now is a good one for the comments. Of all the things that the not milk has pushed to the forefront, and I'm not just talking events like what they say Gavrilo Princip did to the Archdick, to start World War I. I'm not talking about just events, even philosophies, things like of all the things they've ever pushed or they want the people and the masses to believe in, what is the biggest thing they've ever pushed? Now, I'm going to tell you, it gets into the next section. Maybe my answer will be your answer, but to me, it's the way they want you to believe in what space is. To me, that's number one. I can't think of anything offhand now that's ever been pushed to that degree. And not just talking about Apollo missions. I mean, it goes back to Buck Rogers stories and Flash Gordon stories and Isaac Asimov books and H.G. Wells books. What they want the people to believe space is, they've been laying down for well over 100 years. The first movie of any popularity, the first movie of international fame was a trip to the moon with a spaceship. So to me, that is number one. Therefore, let's not get off topic again. They've pushed that to such a degree, to me, per the formula, then there is no chance that space is what they say it is. Actually, guys, we need a formula. We need somebody in the comments to come up with a formula. My mind, it's not a mathematics mind. When I got to the mathematics section of the SATs after the verbal section, which, I obviously did very well on the verbal section, I got to the math and I went, I just started coloring things in. I figured if I just guess, I get like a third or a fourth correct. I mean, I wasn't just guessing, but I struggle with the math, of course, compared to the verbal. So if anybody wants to take a shot at this and actually create a formula for us that we can use, please do so. Again, the event itself, per the intensity of how it's being pushed, and not just how it's being pushed in the news. I mean, let's take space again, for example. It has a variety of different minions running around at all times, pushing what it wants people to believe. Neil of the grass-fed, a grass bot, a grass-fed bison, Mitch Pikachu, in the UK, Brian the Cock, and then the man that we like to talk to, doctor. They have minions running around. So the more minions, that variable that accentuates the intensity of how much the Not Milk is pushing out the concept or the theme or the story, that would be, I don't know how you do it, X to the Y, or what you guys would know it in the formula. As the magnitude of that formula goes up, the chances of it being true or legit go down. So the best thing to consider now would be, is there anything that what we call the Not Milk or the dark part of reality pushed extremely hard, wanting people to believe in it, give it their energy and attention, act in a way that's consistent with what it's pushing throughout their entire lives? Is there anything it's ever pushed to that magnitude that's been legitimate? I need to stop and pause. I don't know. I would doubt it, but I'm going to sit here for a minute and think about it. No. The formula is intact. I can't think of anything that could possibly break the rules, the formula, or the axiom. Say, Matt, the Not Milk and its governments and systems and its authority figures really push this on people. And you know what? It's true. No, I mean, you could get into the weeds like most scientists believe that a daily intake of vitamin C is very beneficial. And is it going to be the opposite? Does that mean we should run from vitamin C? You see what I'm saying? I mean, we can go too far. But I don't think something like that would be too high up on our formula. If a company like Pepsi-Cola that owns Tropicana, if they still do orange juice, and to make a profit, they want to push the vitamin C value of their orange juice. Is that really a Not Milk propaganda along the lines of what they tell you space is? I mean, it's not even in the same ballpark. There are hundreds and hundreds of big companies that provide some sort of food. And the food, after you eat it, you can't be running out to the parking lot and try to sleep it off on a bench. They wouldn't be in business. They'd all go out of business. The food, for example, I know, we know GMO and all that. I know, but it would make sense that if there are health benefits in certain foods, like an orange juice, that the big company, even though that big company is part of Not Milk, would push the health benefit. I don't think that ruins our entire theory or formula. And when there are exceptions, the exceptions are like from the old world or from the old century. They go back a long way. I'll give you an example. And I'll be very careful because, they'll slap me. I'll just say, you know what? I know people that had some real issues, and when they went on the proper dose of their high blood pressure medication, those issues went away. Okay? I think there were some things that were presented to the population in 1920, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, the 20th century, the last century, that actually, from our perspective, came from Not Milk, but were a benefit. I'm not sure that can happen today. A high blood pressure medication, what do they call? I mean, this goes back to, it's got to go back to the 40s or 50s. I mean, this is like penicillin. This is an old invention. In certain areas that have a long tail or history, there are certain things, even in health, of course, that benefit people. But that's also maybe part of our formula, that the benefits, if it came from what we call Not Milk, these are old things. Is there anything in this century that came from Not Milk and was pushed in a big way that was a benefit or not a complete lie or deception or manipulation? And the answer across the board may be no. The airbag recall in my Scion comes to mind. For over 5 years, but I know for a 5-year period, these letters came every other week, all in different types of envelopes to get my attention, with different types of fonts, completely different types of presentations. I think it's like a FedEx almost came once, and it was the same damn letter. Like, how much they pay for that? Now, it's basically stopped. I probably got one 3 or 4 months ago. Let's just say it's stopped. For 5, 6, or 7 years, every other week. Now, the formula. Because of the intensity, we'll talk about on the back end here also not taking this too far. We have to be careful not to take it too far. But per the basic formula that we've devised, because of the intensity of how much it wanted me to take that car in for the airbag recall, then per the formula, the inverse, I know without a doubt it doesn't give one crap about a shard flying off into my forehead. It pushed its recall notices on me with such intensity per our formula. I know that it's for its own purposes. We could debate that some other time. Another chip tracking. This AI system needs to track and trace everything. Its quest for data is insatiable. If somebody's using the old tech and that person's falling through the cracks, it almost shows like a human quality. It can't take it. It's not acceptable. And nobody can fall through the cracks. Everything needs to be tracked and traced. Tell them to get the new airbag. Tell them to get the new airbag. Tell them to get the new airbag. Tell them that it's dangerous. Tell them that it's dangerous. Tell them eventually it'll break down. Eventually it'll break down. The intensity of which it didn't care one bit about an airbag for safety. No doubt about that. It was doing it for its own reasons, whatever those reasons may be. But the proviso or the warning to anybody listening to this, I implore you, don't take it too far. Even in my airbag example, there probably was 50 or 100 people that got hurt somewhere in the world from defective airbags. I mean, sometimes it's not all intended. Perhaps they saw this happening and said, oh, we can use this to get everybody back in. We have this new sort of tracking chip or whatever it may be. There might have been 50 or some people hurt. It just because it was so aggressive in wanting me to take it back in, that doesn't mean, again, it's not all or nothing. It's not all then cake in a lake. And not one person was ever hurt by their airbag. It could have been. Well, so what? I'm willing to say whatever the chances are, very, very low. I don't want whatever they want to put in there. They don't care one bit about keeping me safe with a new airbag. They want that car back into Toyota for another reason. Toyota themselves might not even, that dealership might not even be aware of what's going on. But I won't comply when it wants to push something on me so aggressively. That doesn't mean I'm not taking a risk. Maybe there could be something if I were to hit into a telephone pole and a shard would come out of the airbag. Don't take it too far. Some people might say, well, they're not going to replace the airbag, in my opinion, with something that is more defective. I believe they're thrilled to get the car back in there for whatever reason they want the car back in there, and they will put a new safe airbag in there. It doesn't mean they're loading it up with like shards and like nails and stuff like a roadside bomb in Afghanistan into where you beep the steering wheel. I think it is. If you take it in, I think they'll probably give you a new safe airbag. Okay, no, don't take it too far. Some people may say, I don't care what chip they put in here. I don't care about the tracking. I don't want to take any chance because my young teenager's starting to drive. I want a new airbag. And that would make sense to me. I'm just saying, because of the aggressiveness of its push, we know that what it's asking me to do is not really what it wants to accomplish or what its final outcome is intended to be. And again, because I was so distracted from the main headlines and I started that sidebar, there's a lot of parts of this opposites presentation I'm not going to get to. But let me tell you about this one thing, just so you can start thinking about the rule of opposites here in a different way. I mean, it's pretty obvious to the old guard. I'm talking about things like the airbag presentation. Sure, Matt, when it really wants you in there that aggressively, it's for another reason, the rule of opposites. But we need to take this law of opposites here into whole new places. We have to expand our thinking, and I'll just lay this down now, and we'll come back to it in another video. I have thought about this many times over the last few years. I observe animals like the hawk flying over my head, the turkey buzzard sailing without flapping. For if it's over an updraft or a heat source, it can soar without flapping probably for 30 minutes, just like a glider. I observed other animals saying it's almost maybe even because of the rule of opposites, or at least you could say the rule of opposites fuels the theory in this direction that we are the lowest form of animal here, or anything here. I've thought about this over and over, and I'll just float it now. We'll talk about it again in the future. We could be the lowest form here, and I mean of anything, even of an earthworm or anything. You don't know what is being experienced by those other creatures or animals here. So maybe in this conversation, we'll leave the earthworm out of it. But even so, how do you know what its experience is? We don't know. We'll get to that some other time. But you know how many times I've seen mostly birds flying overhead, and just, I've said, the bird's just shaking its head down at our cities being built and what it observes. And for us to believe that we are a higher life form than that bird, that bird could be a spiritual part of something much more advanced than we are. Like we like to say we're more advanced than the Melvin peas of the world, and that could be a different type of incarnation that Tony calls sequential. I mean, we like to think, we don't know for sure, but it is pretty obvious we are more advanced than the role player here, the role player minion low life like a Melvin. Okay, that's pretty clear that whatever that thing is not the same as you and me. But the arrogance to believe that we are higher than the bird or something. I mean, to me, we're not. I mean, I really believe that bird could be a spirit, part of something. It could be even part of your same higher self, but a different aspect. But we're not going to be higher than it. I mean, you've got to be kidding me. That bird laughs at the way the human being lives its life. And it is, again, the rule of opposites supports that we know this rule is real in this reality. The rule of opposites supports the fact that this says we're the highest on the food chain. We're the top. The rule of opposites then means we're the lowest or one of the lowest. And I would never take that off the table. Again, even right down to the earthworm. You don't have any... just because you don't want to be crawling around in the dirt, how do you know what that experience is like for the earthworm? We have no idea. I think the rule of opposites here is real. And to say, it can't apply to that, Matt, that is naive and ignorant. This is potentially another problem for the counter-argument presented sometimes to me from the no consequences people. I've said I've moved closer to their camp, but I'm not entirely in their camp. Say in this, I don't know if it was the 80s, the big horrible humane story was people taking baseball bats and sheaths to harp seals. Luckily, maybe they're all extinct, and if they are, that would be terrible, but that story, I haven't heard about that story for a while, to get the fur of the baby seal. So, again, I'm saying that not only are these animals not lower than us, they probably all are higher than us, potentially, and there's a spiritual being connected to these animals, just as there is one connected to you. So a no consequences person is going to say, you spend your life just taking a baseball bat to harp seals, to another spiritual being, but that's just, there's no consequence whatsoever. I think there would probably have to be. From my experience with cats, okay, there's no doubt it is not just delusions of grandeur. It's not just saying it to make myself feel good. There is no question in my mind that whatever Bell, Cooper, Bootsy, Puss, whatever those entities are, it's not just snuffed out for good. I will understand or experience an aspect. It could be an aspect of myself, but that entity is absolutely not just something that came from the Big Bang and is snuffed out. There's no question about it. I will experience what that entity is in some form in the future. No doubt about it. So why wouldn't I think the same about the horse or the bird or any other lower life form? Where do you draw the line? That could not be the case with a mosquito. Why? Because it's a mosquito and not a cat? You can't draw the line there. Therefore, all life has to be valued. Probably one of the basic lessons of coming in to this reality system, with exceptions. They put the human syphilis in something called a deer tick. I'm going to kill it because it's basically trying to kill me. I'm sorry. Mosquitoes, they try to suck blood. They do carry disease. I don't really have much of a problem in the middle of the night swatting a mosquito if it's trying to drink my blood like a vampire first. But for all else, I will move mountains. I had to dump my trash can over the other day. Went to put a trash bag in, full bag. And then there's a spider. It's made a web on the bottom. Why do you want to make a web in here? There's no bugs. It's pitch black. The lid's closed. One of these big trash cans with the lid. He wouldn't come out. Had to dump it upside down he just wouldn't come out. I had to dump it upside down, bang the top. Fine. He falls out in the driveway, starts crawling away. I hope he didn't get hurt, but I can't do any more than that. I got to take the trash out to the road, but it's like, it is the amount of bugs that get in my way where I can't do what I was going to do until the bug moves along or something. It's like, it's getting a little bit crazy, but I will continue to do this because I believe in this. I believe this is absolutely one of the, not that I learned a lesson, it's just it's in my inner tuning fork that all life is to be respect. Yeah, Matt, you going to hug trees next? I already do that. Yeah, it's touchy-feely, but again, it goes along with the graduation. People talked about the sentimentality we have now, the nostalgia, the seeing everything in a different light. This all goes along. It's all very positive with getting ready to exit this type of experience. I believe they go hand in hand. The feedback, the positive feedback to us comes in this way. So as we talk about this rule of opposites in the future, don't limit it to just not milk presentations. We generally know when the not milk's pushing, we know it's the opposite. But apply it or start to think in terms of everything going on in this entire reality. The relationship between the human at the top of the food chain and everything else. Well, it could be the opposite. There's a lot of things like this we haven't thought about if this rule of opposites applies in more areas than just what the not milk is pushing. Thanks for listening.